White.
Here.
Hinderman, yes. Poole.
Here.
Bowden.
Here.
Andrews.
Here.
All present.
Approve of giving public meeting notice.
Yep, notices are posted at both schools, Central Bill, City Hall, members of the media.
Thank you. Item 3 is consideration of the consent agenda. Are there any items A through C that the board would like for discussion? Hearing none, would someone make a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I will second. Joel.
Yes.
Barth.
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Hinderman, yes. Poole.
Yes.
Bowden.
Yes,
Andrews.
Yes.
Motion carried.
And item 4 is administrative reports for the RW Baird presentation.
Elise, everyone, this is Elise, and she's going to be giving us a presentation. And we asked her to come in and talk a little bit about the pros and cons of both types of referendum. We saw a lot of passage and failure from both recurring and non-recurring. And so we wanted to bring in the experts, and she works with, Baird works with probably over 200 schools a year. And they do a lot of referendum work. So she is the person that we call when we have questions. We wanted her to give you a presentation on those things and allow you some time to ask some questions. And then after all the reports, we'll come back and we can have a discussion about anything. We will not be making a decision about recurring versus non-recurring for a while. So we'll have this meeting where you'll get to listen to the expert. We'll have a couple other special meetings I'll talk about in January where we have more discussion before we make the decision, which would be the week before we have to tell the state what we're going to do. So there's no decision making on this tonight. This is just information gathering. Okay, so Elise, they're all yours.
Thank you. Yes, Elise Mern. I work with Baird, a financial services firm. I think you're familiar with a couple of my other teammates who have had the opportunity to share with the board. I actually spoke with the banking teammate who had worked with the district in the past. Her name was Lisa Voisin. And she's retired, but I called her on my drive and she wanted to say hello. So as Aaron mentioned, we do work with school districts all across the state. We have a robust team of professionals that helps in all types of school finance issues. Today specifically, I looked at tax bills from 3 different school districts to kind of help explain and demystify the school portion of the tax bill. So it's just, the most wonderful time of the year as it relates to that. But we, as Aaron mentioned, we do work with school districts all across the state. So we've worked with MPS and we've worked with Washington Island, which is the largest and the smallest school districts in the state of Wisconsin. Our school business solutions team specifically, so I've been at Baird now for 10 years, and we specifically work on the business office side, really kind of the operations, and more of our conversations lately have revolved around referendums, just kind of by virtue of the school funding formula, helping to explain some of those pieces. So, if some of the material that I covered this evening is repetitive or redundant, I apologize. Sometimes if someone else explains it in a different way, sometimes that's the thing that helps it click. But I understand that you all have had a lot of conversation around this over the last couple of years. So our Baird budget forecast model is a tool that school districts use to help forecast into the future. So it's a tool that Cuba City uses and has used for many years. Currently, 263 school districts across the state use it. So it's not a crystal ball by any means. If we could see the future, I think we'd be doing a different job. But it helps us to plan for some of those unknowns, the what ifs, and to equip the board with that information. What if we, lost 10 students annually for the next 5 years? What if we gave 5% raises, 3% raises, 1.5% raises, those types of things to help us know, what is the fiscal viability of these choices? And then especially with the biennial budget coming up, it allows us to kind of run scenarios to see what helps us and what doesn't. So the model's a great tool. It unfortunately cannot tell you exactly what will happen leading into the future, but it's better than, well, we could have never known, right? So just to kind of help give a little background on what the model kind of can and cannot do, but it is what allows us to kind of talk about some of these big picture items more concretely, right? It's not just this vague idea, well, maybe if we lost 10 students, it would increase our taxes or lower our taxes. We can run it through the model and actually get a relative answer to those questions. So the goal for tonight is to kind of talk high level referendum 101. And then we will talk about the revenue limit because it's the largest source of school district revenues. And then really just pros and cons, it's help define recurring versus non-recurring referendum a little bit farther. And then every school district across the state is going to have a different answer as to which one, recurring or non-recurring, is better or worse for them, for their district. So I can share with you anecdotally what I've experienced statewide. And then hopefully, if there's any kind of questions that I can help answer, we'll get to those too. So kind of starting with referendum 101. These are just a couple headlines that we've grabbed over the course of this past year. This year, 2024, being a record year for school districts for referendums. So over half of the entire state asked one type of question for referendums in 2024, which is just remarkable. It's a historical number for the purposes of, the history of school district, kind of this referendum timeframe. So just to put it in perspective, and there are more, right? As districts gear up for April of 2025, these stories aren't going away. So the reason for this is related to the revenue limit, which we'll get to in the second section. But I thought it'd be helpful to go through the different types, knowing that you guys already kind of have this background, but because, Cuba City, someone in more recent history did have a capital referendum. And what we're talking about today is very different. Okay. So when we think about the two types, we first put it into the two buckets of a capital referendum or a debt referendum, where you have to go out and borrow money in order to usually fund a large scale project. And then there's an operating referendum. And that really goes towards funding the operations, the ongoing programs and processes of the day-to-day of the school district. So we have on the capital side, it's really new construction, big picture projects. Think things like really well beyond the $1 million threshold, things that most districts can't afford in their general operating budget day to day. For a few reasons. One, imagine you spend $1 million on a new roof in 1 year. That's $1 million that then is being pulled away from the resources of the day-to-day of the school district, thinking mostly of people, which is what the majority of those operating referendums go towards funding. Okay, so that in that bucket, you're going to see mostly salary and benefits, curriculum. I say ongoing maintenance, right? Things like carpet replacement, lights, windows, a little bit smaller scale when we're thinking of the dollar amount. All school districts in their operating budget do typically include an ongoing maintenance item, but it's the size that's usually different. And then within the types, we have recurring, which I really refer to as kind of permanent, and then non-recurring, which is one time in the years that they've been approved by the board. So for those who are more visual learners, this is a good visual representation of, the recurring exemption is the referendum increases the district's revenue limit authority in the year that it's authorized, and then it lives within the district's base revenue limit authority into the future. Okay, so you can kind of see this is the year we're imagining, this is the year it's authorized, year one, and then it kind of becomes a part of their base revenue limit in perpetuity. The non-recurring is the one time, okay, so in the years that the board approves that additional revenue limit authority, and then it goes away. Okay, so seemingly then in this year, either someone would have to come back for that additional revenue, or you'd have to reduce expenses in order to kind of bridge the gap between. So statewide, this map represents the number of districts, or really it's just a visual representation of the fact that almost the entire state has had to ask an operating question since 1990. And we use that time frame because the early 90s is when revenue limits were established. Revenue limits is what caps districts' ability to raise funding, essentially, and it's formula driven by the state. Okay, so this map tells us that there are only 54 school districts who have not had to ask during this period of time. And Cuba City is no stranger to referendums, okay? So I just included Cuba City's referendum history just to show, you know, that the district has gone for a variety of different types. So the type has been denoted for issued debt and then recurring or non-recurring this is over a 25-year period of time. Okay, so recurring kind of earlier on in the process, back in the early 2000s. And then a couple, we've got mostly recurring throughout this list, but kind of depending on the needs and what those questions are tied to can also change what type you might ask for, what type of referendum. This next slide just shows also compared to your CISA, compared to CISA 3, that Cuba City is definitely not alone, as the map also would indicate, right? This is not a Cuba City specific problem, the need to go to referendum. It is absolutely kind of a statewide problem. And CISA 3 also within CISA 3 itself, you know, has seen a variety of results kind of across this region. So before moving on, I do talk in more specific about the pros and cons of recurring versus non-recurring. That kind of first part was just to really explain the differences. So before I move on to revenue limits, which is very exciting, are there any questions about the slides I covered? There's more to come, so you will still have an opportunity to ask just in case. So we talk so much about revenue limits because they are the largest source of a school district's operating revenue. It typically makes up between 75% to 95% of a district's operating revenue. And that's why we focus so much on the pieces that go into calculating the revenue limit. Because when we have an understanding of what's happening in here, it helps us make sense of, you know, if our revenues are largely staying flat or the same, or if our revenues are even going up, let's say 1% year over year, but we have expenses that are increased between 3 and 5%, how are we ever supposed to keep pace? Just from, you know, a bottom line perspective, right? So your options are to reduce expenses or increase revenues in the ways that the formula allows us to. Okay, so the way that the formula allows us to is by seeking voter approval, going to your community and saying, will you allow us to raise revenues, raise taxes in order to kind of bridge the gap between revenues and expenses? So to get an idea of what's happening with that largest bucket of our operating revenues, we want to really parse out what's happening in each of the pieces of the formula. I wasn't a math teacher, but I feel like this kind of parsed down visual representation helps us kind of get to why this might not be enough. So the district membership is calculated on a 3-year rolling average, and that's to help districts who are in declining enrollment so that they don't just hemorrhage money as they lose students, which is not a Cuba City specific problem either. 75% of the state of Wisconsin is in declining enrollment. So we take that district membership times a per pupil dollar amount. That per pupil dollar amount is different across the state as well. That per pupil dollar amount is adjusted by the state biennial budget, but it was set in place when revenue limits were established. So that number, that per pupil number, is different everywhere. In Gibraltar, which is like Door County area, that per pupil dollar amount is over $24,000 per pupil. In Ladysmith, which is like a rural town in the middle of Wisconsin, that per pupil dollar amount is $11,600. So statewide, it's different, and that also affects a district's ability to raise revenues to educate kids. After we take that membership number times the per pupil dollar amount, we can then increase our revenue limit authority if we pass a recurring or a non-recurring referendum, which are exemptions. There are other exemptions as well, but for the purposes of this conversation, that's the one we care most about. So if we're trying to look at what's happening within that formula to allow us to make sense of that revenue limit, in Cuba City, over the last 5 years, the district has lost 34 FTE. Okay.
Keep in mind, she's talking about resident students. So these are students who live in Cuba City district that we educate. So if you're looking at it and you say, well, our enrollment's been steady for 5 years, this doesn't take in consideration open enrollment, which is why our open enrollment has kind of met that. We've been within 10 students each of the last 5 school years. She's talking about resident enrollment, which is different than total enrollment.
Yes, this is our ability to raise revenues. So when we think about resident FTE, which helps drive our revenues, and then we think about enrollment, which is I affectionately call butts in seats, the actual kids that are educated, fed, bused in Cuba City School District. When we talk about enrollment, that's when we're thinking about expenses, right? We still have to staff in order to educate the number of enrolled students, right? So resident FTE are really the eligible residents that live within Cuba City School District boundaries. So we care about this number because it determines our ability to raise revenue. And if it's going down, then our authority goes down.
I do have one question. Again, that resident average is regardless if they are in school here or not. So I know we don't get the benefit of the open enrollers coming in, but we don't lose out on the ones going out either.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And they're funded differently as well.
Yep.
So that's a good clarification. So that resident FTE times the per pupil dollar amount plus our exemptions is basically that's that revenue limit authority, the maximum amount of revenue that you can raise via state aid and property taxes. Okay. So over this 6-year period of time, you can see that Cuba City's ability to raise that revenue limit authority. My takeaway when I pulled this slide was that over a 6-year period where expenses have absolutely gone up, Cuba City's ability to raise additional revenues has stayed, it's gone up from 1920 to 24-25 by $400,000. And then I think about what the cost of 3% is on just my salaries, and you won't be able to keep pace when that's kind of the way the formula works. So how we get around it, or how we increase revenues if we're not completely cutting expenses or altering the way we offer programming, then we ask for an operating referendum.
Have any idea what our expenses have gone up over that same 5-year period where we gained 400,000 additional revenue?
I don't, and what complicates things further, because I know that everyone loves that school finance is very easy to understand. During that period of time, we had ESSER, pandemic funding, right? So in many districts, it kind of masked that base building revenue that we weren't getting from the state. We had federal money to kind of cover those. Now that it's gone, it kind of has helped some districts see, all right, well, over that period of time, we didn't have base building revenue. We had one-time revenue, and that's gone now. So it's a good question. I know it's in the forecast model. You'd get it as part of like your annual meeting. You get that 3-year snapshot, but we can gather that too.
And I'm sorry, that's too fine for me to read. Could you tell me what the first
Yes.
year number was?
Yes.
And last year that makes that 400,000?
Yep. 7.2 million, roughly,
7.6.
to 7.62. Yep. So that is that maximum revenue limit authority. The state kicks in a portion of it, but then the rest falls locally. So basically, our whoever contributes, and it does matter for the purposes of taxes, but for the purposes of our revenue raising ability, this is kind of the number that we focus on. Now, we're coming up on a new biennial budget, which is always fun to kind of talk about the what ifs and, what helps us most. But without having that concretely, there are so many districts right now that are saying, well, we know that we need a solution today for next year's budget. So this is what we know now, and this is our best guess kind of as we head forward. We hope that the biennial budget will come in better than expected, and then our backup plan is X, Y, and Z. Right? So there's been a lot of discussion around raising that maximum revenue per member. There's been a lot of discussion around additional revenue limit authority, special education reimbursement, those types of things. But when we think about the majority of our operating revenue and this formula specifically, the trends are declining enrollment, and then that maximum revenue per member has where that has been over the past however many years. So by virtue of the way that these two operating referendum types work, there are pros and cons of each, which is why I'm here. Okay, so the non-recurring, as I mentioned, it has a period of time. Okay, the board authorizes the years and the dollar amounts in which that additional revenue raising authority comes onto the district's books and then goes away. The district needs to come back if additional years are needed. So once it sunsets, you've come back, which some people have affectionately called them the never-ending cycle, because once you've increased that temporary revenue, barring major structural changes to the way schools are funded or the district's expense budget, you're going to need to come back, likely. And that alone is fatiguing enough. Most districts will continue to ask for subsequent dollars. A lot of districts who go out for an operating referendum, the message is, we will be back. And they are more often used by school districts. The benefit of that structure, I think, is that it allows the district to assess its needs in the time frame the dollars are approved. So Cuba City today looks different than Cuba City did in 1819. Looks different than it will in 2930. So the temporary authority allows you to meet the immediate needs of the district's budget, and then reevaluate as that time comes to pass. So once those dollars sunset, it allows the district, the board, the community to evaluate what did those go towards, and do we want to continue those types of programs in our school? It's exhausting. It's a full-time job. I think Aaron and Heather would speak to that. You, outside of the going-ons of your regular day-to-day, you're also providing your community with the information they need in order to stay informed and make an educated vote. And so for that reason, the district should be working on all the information related to the referendum. So the non-recurring, that I think that is a benefit of it. Also, based on the fact that we operate on a 2-year budget cycle for schools, that as well, even if you go for, there was a district who went for a 7-year referendum. And in the middle, it came to pass, it was apparent that 7 years was too long for them, and they had to come back in the middle. And they had to explain why. So if you're looking between 3 to 5 years, that's usually the sweet spot. That's the highest utilized for districts, is between that 3 to 5 year range, because it allows you to kind of live within 2 budget cycles and have, a set of knowns for at least a fiscal year or 2. Your numbers are theoretically better. So recurring, then, ongoing funds are added to the base and they carry forward forever. Yes. So they are a part of that base revenue limit authority. They get included in that revenue per member dollar amount. But if your membership continues to decline, you're going to see that recurring authority decrease in value as well, because you don't have as many students to kind of multiply that additional authority by. So over time, that does go down. And so for so many districts who are going to recurring this go around, or who are considering it, that is something that we make sure they're aware of. If you lose 100 students in a 5-year period of time, that's going to impact that authorized dollar amount. So we find ourselves actually, for districts who go for recurring, educating around, these are all the things that kind of cause that to go down. And even if it stayed with the district over time, the revenue stayed flat and expenses go up, we still would maybe see a need to return. It just it prolongs the need to come back. So it is a longer term fix. Typically, it allows the district to kind of increase their revenue limit authority, and then it stays with them. So it does allow the district to kind of usually have a longer term fix, but it isn't forever, right? The authority is forever, but it's not a forever fix. And usually it's a one-time amount, but in Cuba City's case this past April, I think the idea was to kind of ask for what was needed in the years in order to kind of strike the right balance. There are districts who will ask for, say, $1 million in year 1, and then an inflationary increase in year 2, 3, and 4 to kind of carry forward. I think Potosi did something similar to that. So there's different kind of ideas about how to approach the dollar amount, but usually you'll see a one-time dollar amount, and then that kind of goes and stays with the district. So I mentioned, the benefit of the recurring is that it is typically for a longer period of time. One of the cons is if you are in declining enrollment, it may take away the value over a period. Another consideration, and this has come up for more districts who are considered a low revenue district. So a low revenue district is a district whose that per pupil dollar amount, go back here. This per pupil dollar amount I mentioned is different for districts all across the state. There's I guess what we'll call a ceiling And this year, that ceiling, or in the last biennial budget, it was $11,000. Okay, so they raised that for districts who were low spending at the time to try to make this per pupil number more equitable statewide. So the biennial budget can increase that number. If they increase it again, and it takes the district's per pupil dollar amount up to a certain point, you may also kind of see diminishing returns on the value of the recurring referendum, because the recurring referendum is going to add to that number. So if you add to it by seeking voter approval, that's one thing. Then say the next year the legislature increases it. I'm not going to say you lost the value of it, but then you may find yourself thinking like, man, what if, if we didn't go and we would have gotten it because the legislature increased it, So that's been coming up a lot more lately as advocacy efforts grow around that per pupil dollar amount, increasing it. So, like I said, that one's a little bit in the weeds, and I don't think it applies as much to Cuba City because you guys are, I have the number. You guys are above the 11,325. You guys are at 12,235.
So potentially, we would fall under, if they raised it, they probably wouldn't go probably higher than 12,000, because I think they took was it 10,000 to 11,000 or something like that?
Yes, which we had not, within my own team, who've been doing this for a while, no one was expecting that. Took a lot of people by surprise. The conversation, so it's a really good point. So the conversation around it has been, I think the DPI wants 12,300. But the Association for Equity and Funding is asking for 12,600. So in that case, if that comes on the books next year in 25-26, that would benefit Cuba City by about $400 per pupil. So if you passed a recurring and it raised that maximum revenue per member to 12,700 or 12,600, and then the legislature increases it, it's like,
I guess the biennial budget though isn't a done deal till at least October.
no, right.
And so we're sitting almost a year out from their next budget being finalized.
Right,
And we can only run a referendum, I believe, in April.
in 25, yes,
And the next one would be April 26th, since there's not a November.
correct. Yes, and so for a lot of districts, they're weighing that. They're saying, if we had a recurring and it raised our revenue limit authority to X and legislature raised it to Y, what are we missing out on? And is it meaningful for us? If it's $100 per pupil, it's usually not enough. It's not meaningful enough to not go. Or then it makes you think maybe we go for non-recurring then. Then it's not an issue.
That's what I was gonna ask you. Can I ask a question right now?
Yes.
So when you're out visiting schools and gathering information, in light of all that information and in light of the current Department of Education, no one really knows what it's gonna look like in the next 6 months.
Right.
And there's concerns. Obviously, is there more of a sense that schools are weighing on the non-recurring side because they can set their, 2 years and we're gonna ride this out and we're gonna see where all of the dust settles, and then what are you seeing more of, I guess?
It's a great question. So it depends on the district and the need. So for those who are, say, looking to add or enhance a program, they're going for recurring because the goal of the board is that program never goes away. They want it to stay. And so, whatever the biennial budget is, we want this recurring program to be a part of what we offer. That's what we're going to ask for. But to your point about the biennial budget, it adds a layer of complexity for the communication for districts thinking about it now. So for that reason, non-recurring may be better because this is what we know now. This is our authority for 3 or 4 or 5 years, say. And then when those dollars expire, we'll come back knowing something different. So there is also something to be said for the timing of it, right? So this April, is sticky because we don't know. But we make our best guess. If things come in better, we have a plan. If things come in worse, we have a plan. So
Our,
that makes this
our,
timing.
that, per student base will still be 11,000, at least for the start of the next school year. Plus, is it 325 per student increase?
Yeah.
For next year as well. I've seen that fluctuate everywhere from 0 to 325, I think is my most memorable high.
Yeah. Yep. So even I have a longitudinal revenue limit worksheet, which is out in the DPI, which is like my go-to as it relates to history. 325 is the highest in this last 22-year time frame. The new biennial budget, so for 25, 26, 26, 27, so best case scenario, we know what it is on July 1st, but the reality typically is that October is when we actually have the real numbers for
So-
budget building.
So that thought in my mind that it's gonna be 325 is not for sure. Until they set the budget, they could change it to whatever.
That's how
I,
it's currently
Yeah.
written, but they can change it at the next biennial budget.
yes, it's in, gosh, there's been lawsuits arguing against the constitutionality of what allowed the 325 to happen, because it's in place for the next 400 years. So I think the 325 is our surest bet. It's the other pieces that are more questionable. So yes, so the 325 per pupil would take the 12,235 plus 325, barring any other recurring exemptions, which actually you guys didn't have this year. So yes. We hope.
Thank you.
Okay, and then these last kind of talking points, we talked through a lot of this already, but those indicators of success are hyperlinked. So Erin and Heather have access to them. It's statewide data. It's a 20-year look back of recurring referendum passage rates, non-recurring referendum passage rates, and issue debt referendum passage rates over the period of time. So the data suggests that a November presidential election has the highest percent passage rate. In Cuba City, that didn't come to pass. That didn't come to fruition. So there's data that doesn't necessarily indicate that that's when you go. You go when it's best for you. But there are some that like to say, well, non-recurrings pass best in even years or, what have you. So there is data and it's linked in the presentation so you can have access to that. We know that non-recurring historically has higher success rates than recurring. As it relates to the amount and the time frame, like we've had districts ask us, does a 3-year have greater success or does a 5-year have greater success? We don't have firm data on it because some of it's a question of causation and correlation, right? Like 3-year may show over a period of time a better tax impact or a worse tax impact. So for that reason, I don't know that we can really draw a conclusion on that. Then can we ask sequential questions like if we put 2 questions on the ballot, because you can only put 2 questions per calendar year. If the recurring passes, can we not ask a non-recurring, or vice versa? If the recurring fails, can we do a non-recurring? So you can't do that. I think it would ultimately be too confusing either way. And then the last consideration is whether or not there's a penalty if a district asks and it fails. So again, it's related to that low revenue ceiling threshold. Now, the most confusing piece of legislation I think that's come out lately is there is a penalty for districts who fail an operating referendum. They're frozen at the low revenue ceiling or that maximum revenue per member that they have. they're frozen for a 3-year period of time unless you pass a subsequent operating question. So to me, it's like, I don't think any school districts wants to be in this position. No one wants this. No one wants to go out and ask for this. And then if it fails, they're penalized. So that's currently still in place.
So what does that mean for us? Because we've already failed.
What this means is if the legislature increased the low revenue ceiling above 12,600, then Cuba City could possibly miss out on those additional dollars if they do not subsequently pass another question.
Okay, so if we go to referendum and we fail
Mhm.
and they release extra funds,
For the low revenue ceiling, if they were to increase it over $1,600,
we could lose those funds because we'd be penalized for not passing a referendum.
correct. So what's the likelihood that they'll raise the low revenue ceiling from 11,000 to 12,600? Depends. The jump from 10,000 to 11,000 was the largest any of us had seen in the last 20 years. So to suggest they go up by 1,600 then is
That's why she said possibly.
possible.
There is a chance.
Well, and even so if it's 12,600 and you take the 12,235 plus 325, is that like $50 per pupil? It's more meaningful if they put it in the SPED reimbursement. So possibly for a district who's at 11,325 and they raise it to even 12, that's more meaningful than it is in Cuba City. So, yes. So that last piece, and definitely the maximum revenue per member, is much more nuanced, but it's important.
How long has that been in place? Because I've heard of that too. But let's see.
Yes, 2017 is when it came on board. And
Southwestern had that happen.
I think we did. That's why I think I heard of them, yeah.
which, there are districts that said, we'll go for referendum for $1 so that the freeze is lifted. If it means that we get to increase that maximum revenue per member by, 300, and 5 years ago, it was 100, then 300, then 300. So,
Since we can only run one referendum, is there any, and this maybe isn't fair, so you can choose to answer or not answer, is there any reason we should ask 2 questions on our one and only referendum in 2025? Meaning the sort of the what if you want something passed. I'd like my cake and my ice cream, but you ask will you give me the cake? And then the second question, give me the ice cream.
I understand the question. I think it depends on what the goals of the district would be as it relates to the specific dollar amounts and the corresponding type, right? So another district did ask 2 types, Judah and Wanakee, and they were kind of lumped together, but they went towards different things. So I believe in, and I don't know the Wanakee story as well, but I think the idea is, we have a recurring program we need to continue funding, or we have certain initiatives and programs that we must have in order to continue being who we are or offering what we do. That's why it's kind of tricky to say, like, when we think about the differentiation between these, you would argue that salaries and benefits, curriculum and instruction, these are all ongoing needs. These are all permanent needs of the district, right? So then for that reason alone, you would say, well, then every district should be going for recurring. But it's that idea of that forever money that I think is really hard to kind of keep in mind over that period of time, right? That's really hard. I think instead the idea of we'll approve this dollar amount for these programs you say they're going towards, and then in 3 years we should evaluate. We should consider if we need to keep offering, ag if we have 3 kids in the program, or a FACE program, or, fill in the blank, right? Which is really hard because in most districts, that's one person. But, do we continue funding these initiatives with however many kids in those areas? So that is the benefit of having the non-recurring, is just that it allows you to reevaluate and say, what do we want to continue offering and what makes sense?
Thank you.
Non-answer. I think I would say though, I think ultimately the energy going in to explain the difference would be not worth it.
Any questions, board?
Thank you, Elise. We appreciate you driving all the way here. Travel safely on the way back.
Yep. Let me know if there's anything as you kind of decompress. I'm happy to answer anything.
You can complete that.
Okay, sounds good.
Jason, would you give us the elementary?
Yes. It's been a very busy past month. CCA participated in a community holiday food drive in coordination with the Cuba City Lioness Holiday Project. Students earned points for a classroom award and individual chances to put a pie in the face at the November Cuban celebration. Many students and families participated. We together donated in our building, donated 2 pickup truckloads of food. Students, staff, and community members had cheers and laughs with the pie in the face celebration. And thank you to Ms. Casper, Ms. Gall, Ms. Redfern, Ms. Hinderman, and Ms. Trevethan for organizing our portion of the food drive and the celebration. We're also thankful to the school staff and members of the Cuba City Police and Fire Departments for being willing participants in the incentive celebration. Above all, we really express our gratitude to Cuba City Lioness and the families that donated items for helping others in need during the holiday season. A thank you note is included for you to review with that from the Lioness Project. A thank you to the Cuba City School District Sunshine Club and the Cuba City PTO for providing treats, snacks, and holiday fun to school staff throughout the school year. On behalf of the staff members, I want to express our appreciation for the recognition of our daily tasks and their efforts that they put into bolstering our spirits and wellness. PTO also has several other activities that I think they deserve a lot of recognition for. So continued support in that is appreciated. Our 4-year-old kindergarten classes invited family and friends in to participate in the 4K Cookie Day. The building was abuzz with the enthusiasm that only our 4K students and teachers can match on a daily basis. We want to thank Ms. Egan, Ms. Repertala, and Ms. Ekstrom for their extraordinary efforts in putting that together. Thank you to our 5th grade classes for being big buddies to the 5K classes in their gingerbread making. Thank you to Ms. Davies, Ms. Glennon, Ms. Davis, Ms. McQuaid, Ms. Visagi, and Ms. Blahnik for working together on that event. We had several students from UWP participating this semester in our building through pre-student teaching experiences. University supervisors, Ms. Caitlin Rosemeyer and Ms. Shelley Cascio, worked with many of our staff members to mentor aspiring educators in providing meaningful connections with our students. We had a wonderful experience with all of them. We invite the Cuba City School Board and community into our K-2 Fine Arts program tomorrow at 2 p.m. in the CCS Gymnasium. Ms. Adetta and Ms. Sandra look forward to celebrating the many special talents our students continue to develop and explore. A special thank you to Chief Zach Lovell and Sergeant Cody Ryan for their continued presence and support in our buildings. They are a big part of our daily routines, and we appreciate seeing them. Congratulations to our middle school band and choir members on a successful winter concert. We are excited to see their continued development under the guidance of Ms. Julie Clayton and Mr. Cody Clayton. Thank you to Cuba City Light and Power for providing and donating a beverage to all staff members from one of the local coffee trucks. A special thank you to Ms. Jill Hill for coordinating that effort for us. And today, Ms. Audetta organized and led a student lip sync battle. And it was a great celebration for us to end the month here. The performances were fantastic on many levels. Our fourth grade students, led by Ms. Brewer and Ms. Holmes, were spreading Cuban cheer throughout the community and school. Events included planning student events during the week and visiting communities, families, and businesses to share cheerful messages. Upcoming for the next semester, we welcome some University of Wisconsin-Platteville students, Miss Elizabeth Andrews, Miss Brittany Ziegler, and Miss Mackenzie Woban, who will join us for the second semester as student teachers, working with Miss Jade Fasagi, Miss Danielle McQuaid, and Miss Miranda Doyle as mentors. And then finally, just on behalf of all CCS staff members, we want to express our thanks and deepest gratitude to Miss Pam Tranel as she finishes up her career here with us and all that she's done.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Any questions? Chris, middle and high school, please.
Yes, the end of the first semester is drawing near, and a lot has happened since my last report in October, with November being dedicated to the state report card. So it's going to be a long one. Boys basketball, girls basketball, wrestling, gymnastics, and POMs are all competing and performing. Middle school will have its second quarterly Cuban celebration tomorrow morning as the second quarter closes. Thank you to Mr. and Miss Belkin for bringing the puppies in. We had a Cuban Paws Day on Monday, December 9th. This is always a welcome treat. Middle school band and choir were joined by the fifth grade band, as Mr. Holzmer mentioned, on Thursday, December 5th to perform in their winter holiday concert. High school band and choir performed their winter holiday concert on Tuesday, December 10th. Both shows were amazing. Thank you to Mr. Clayton, Mrs. Clayton, and Ms. Audetta for their work in getting these students prepared for the shows. FFA fruit is here. It arrived on Wednesday, December 11th, and the students are busy getting it all delivered. Several students were able to attend the national convention in Indianapolis back in the end of October, beginning of November. Having attended this convention when I was in school, I know how much of an amazing opportunity this is for our students. So thank you to Ms. Panscama for organizing it and for the board for allowing it. FCCLA has been working on a clothing drive where they are collecting gently used items for students in need. They have also begun preparing for upcoming regional competitions. Following Halloween, FCCLA collected 52 pounds of candy brought in from our students, and it was donated to a veterans hospital. December 2nd through the 6th was Family and Consumer Sciences Week. For Friday of that week, it was supposed to be celebrating Have a Meal with Your Family Day. So in honor of this, we hosted our first of, I hope, many phone-free Fridays in the high school. Students left their phones in lockers or placed them on a table and enjoyed a little conversation with each other during lunch. American Education Week was November 18th through the 22nd. We celebrated our rock star staff. We are truly fortunate to have such wonderful teachers at our schools. Thank you to Ms. Merwin and the FCCLA students for giving letters of appreciation and treats to our staff. Ms. Burkett has begun working with our Battle of the Books teams as they prepare for competitions coming up in March. She's also been able to take several classes on VR field trips. Our middle school students were able to visit various war memorials during the week of Veterans Day. English 10 students were able to visit the island where Lord of the Flies takes place. And English 12 students virtually visited the Shakespeare Theater. Ms. Bodie's graphic design class has teamed up with Ms. Merwin's food class to decorate some cupcakes for a competition. Food drives were held by the student councils in the high school and middle school leading up to the Thanksgiving break. A great deal of the food was donated to the Lioness Club to help families in need. Thank you to Ms. Mern and Ms. Timmerman for organizing these drives, and to all of our students and their families for the generous donations. Robotics team attended the first of 2 competitions on December 6th and 7th. They placed 10th out of 18 teams and were awarded a special judges award. And I do believe you guys are headed this weekend to the second competition. Thank you to Mr. Miller for organizing a wonderful mock election. Students in his civics classes ran mock presidential and vice presidential campaigns. They were given budgets to spend on advertising and rallies, and then all high school students were given the opportunity to register to vote and ultimately cast their ballot on election day. Congratulations to our newly elected president, Miles Hinderman, and his vice president, Drew Oakey. Also want to give a shout out to Chloe LaRue and Logan Dietzel for running an excellent campaign. I would like to thank Chief Lovell and the Cuba City Police Department for their continued support. They're always willing to help out and are true partners with the school, as our area has recently experienced a tragedy that is never welcome anywhere, but certainly much more concerning when it is so close to home. Officer Jorgensen came to visit the school within an hour of the media reporting this issue, and Chief Lovell was here to follow up at both schools the following day. And it's reassuring to know how much they value our students, staff, and community safety. We're fortunate to have their support. And then finally, we want to thank Pam Trennell on her 35 years of service to the district. Although we will miss her, we wish her all the best in her retirement.
Thank you, Chris. If there's no questions, Whitney, yours for special ed, please.
Just a quick comment. Curtis, I know that right away to- but, I mean, I appreciate it.
The December 10th snapshot is finished. That was on Tuesday, December 10th. It was a learning experience for everyone involved, including myself. A huge shout out to Jessie Dinar for her patience and understanding as she helped me navigate through this process for the first year for myself. The next snapshot will be in the spring of 2025, so we will prep for that probably starting in March. Act 20. Act 20 is a Wisconsin state law that aims to ensure all public school students are proficient readers by the end of 3rd grade. The state law requires schools to assess early literacy skills for students 4K through 3rd. Schools must be compliant in the following areas: early literacy instruction, early literacy assessments, early literacy remediation plans, and diagnostic testing. Cuba City Elementary School is in the compliance with all of these. This past month, we have worked with the interventionist, 2nd grade and 3rd grade teachers. They are working collaboratively to ensure that we are in compliance with the new state laws and creating personal reading plans for any student that falls below the 25th percentile in oral reading fluency. After Christmas break, the interventionists, the 4K teachers, kindergarten teachers, and the 1st grade teachers will work collaboratively to ensure we are in compliance with the new state law through testing students, completing additional diagnostic testing if necessary, and developing personalized reading plans for all those students.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions, Supper? Other business report, please?
Update on the 24-25 fiscal year. At the end of November, we were 42% through our fiscal year, and we have spent about 29% of our budget, which is just about $2.8 million. This is in line with last year's spending. An update on our Fund 49, which is our referendum account. In the month of November, we had revenue totaling $19.11, which was just interest. We had expenses of $1,200, and our balance at the end of the month was $7,590.63. Last week, I received the 25-26 budget model from Baird. So I have started to enter the district's revenue and expense assumptions. And then when we return from the holiday break, I will be running several budget scenarios based off of feedback and direction from the board. Every 10 years, school districts are selected by the Department of Health Services to complete a monitoring review, otherwise known as an audit, of the district's reported information. We were selected this year. So it was the first year that Whitney and I have gone through this audit. And the audit, they're looking at the quarterly reports that were submitted from 22-23. And then I just want to mention that at last month's board meeting, it was mentioned that the district can accept donations to help offset our budget problem. The district always welcomes welcomes donations. However, donations will likely not fix our budget problems. If donations and when donations come into the district, we always work with our legal counsel to ensure that we're following state regulations. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions of her? Aaron, Superintendent? report?
Thank you. In FEMA news, we're nearing the finish line. FEMA Region 5 finalized their project assessment. It has been sent to Washington DC for final approval. Once that's done, we'll be notified of our final reimbursement account in FEMA Go, which is the online reimbursement platform that we'll be utilizing throughout the project. When asked for a potential timeline, Wisconsin Emergency Management asked them for us. We were not given any timeline for this final step. Some of you have probably noticed some different looking poles. The replacement backstops have been installed for our high school baseball field. This is because we moved the parking lot about 150 feet closer to the baseball diamond. And we knew that we were going to have to do some things to protect those cars. This has been in the initial plans. They wanted to wait till the ground was actually frozen, so they didn't damage any equipment or any of our field with their heavy equipment. Obviously, there's a little bit more installation to do, but if you're wondering where those are, there'll be some retractable nets installed on those tall poles. We hope everything is ready for the first day of baseball practice. Next month, we will begin a series of special meetings where we talk about all aspects of the possible April 25 operating referendum, with the final date for language adoption being Monday, January 20th. We will have 4 meetings to talk about a lot of different options. Tonight, we heard from Elise at Baird, and we'll continue that discussion well into January. What we want to do is consider all the possibilities, come up with the option that our community can get behind, support, and vote for. Our first meeting is scheduled for Monday, January 6th. Then we've got another one Wednesday, January 8th, Tuesday, January 14th, and Monday, January 20th will be the last one as we have to send off to DPI our final language on the next day on Tuesday, January 21st. As many of you are aware, our state experienced another tragic school shooting this week, this time at Madison Abundant Life. For some members of our community, this tragedy hit especially close to home as they have family and friends with children who attend that school. It's heartbreaking, and like so many of us, our administrative team found ourselves at a loss of words. In times like these, it's natural to look for some quick solutions, but the reality is the challenges we currently face are complex. The experts remind us there are no simple answers to prevent these tragedies, and yet that doesn't mean that we're powerless in schools. There's an old saying, it takes a village to raise a child, and we believe this to be more true now more than ever. Here in the Cuba City School District, we must continue to work together to be that strong, supportive village for all of our children. Our role as a school is to provide a safe environment where every student feels cared for, valued, and heard. It's able to strengthen the relationship we have with families so that every child knows they're surrounded by people who believe in them and want the very best for them. But this effort requires a lot of us, all of us, students, staff, parents, families, board members, community members, working together to ensure our school remains a place where children can feel safe, supported, and ready to learn. I know our staff are dedicated to those things, and they show it every day. In moments like this, we're reminded how vital connection and compassion are to a strong community. Let us lean on each other, support one another, and continue to foster the kind of environment where our children feel protected, loved, and encouraged to grow. I'd like to thank all of you for being part of that village and everything that you do support our school district. Together, we can show our students in Cuba City that they are not alone, that we are committed to their safety, well-being, and future success. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. And I think in part, I feel like he was talking to me because my granddaughter, a first grader, is a student at Abundant Life Christian School. And having seen the text message that the school sent, that simply only says we have an active shooter situation and you know nothing more. You know nothing more for hours. And having watched all of what's unfolded since then, anything obviously students, staff can do moving forward you know, even if you think, see, or hear something that is suspicious or concerning, please speak up or do something about it, because I don't know, short of that there's any way that we can prevent what happened there elsewhere. But I pray it doesn't happen anywhere else. So thank you. Moving on, discussion. Recurring and non-recurring operational referendum board, what would you like to talk about?
You got a lot of information, so we'll have, this is the first time it's on the agenda. It's gonna be on the next two agendas also. So like, if you're not sure yet of those questions, this isn't, don't think that this is the only time that we'll have to discuss it. But since she was here and since she made herself available for questions, I wanted to have that in case you wanted to have that discussion right now.
The dates that you just read off, have you sent those out or will you send them out?
Tomorrow, I'll send them out to make sure staff know.
Thank you.
Yep.
So where do you want to start the conversation with that, or do you want to table it till our next meeting?
I think it was a lot of information.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, to go back and reflect a little bit on the information, because there's pros and cons, obviously, for both. There's a lot of uncertainty, you know, no matter what the decision is. I personally think I need a little more time to really kind of just dig into some, you know, and do some research on my own a little bit more, but shouldn't have any more answers, then I'm uncomfortable with the uncertainty where we're sitting with the Department of Education, where we're sitting with the release of potential funding. All that makes me just nervous on which directions would be best to go.
I understand, and obviously we have experienced obviously all that uncertainty almost every year. I mean, hearing Heather and Aaron, you know, sitting on pins and needles waiting for the final answer, and you know, they haven't chosen to give us a lot more. And if I guess when we had Jamie Nutter in here, you know, he basically was simply, I think, giving us a message that we need to fix our own problem, that probably don't expect the state to do it.
Just thinking ahead to those upcoming meetings, is there any, or Aaron, both, are there any questions you have tonight that you need direction from us on to prepare for those upcoming meetings? I mean,
Good
you also
question.
got a ton of
Yeah, good question.
information.
So what the structure of those meetings is that the first meeting is just discussion, there's no action. Then the second meeting will act on the things we discussed, and then we'll discuss different things. And then meeting 3 will act on the things that we discussed. So I don't want to have you be like in this decision, like if we had all that discussion today and that you had to vote, that's a rushed decision. So that's how those meetings are structured for meeting 1, 2, 3, and 4. If that helps. So we won't leave that meeting without having the guidance that we need to be ready for the next meeting from you guys.
Any other comments, questions?
I think for that meeting, Heather, would it be possible to run or bring back the same numbers that, so we can see what the impact was as far as tax wise, the tax impact? So if we ran the exact same, we ran the exact same, just to give an idea in front of us again, to have those numbers.
That's probably one of the easiest reports we've ever had. I know you really know. Just as a baseline.
Yeah.
Yep, that's what we, yeah.
I'm guessing I'll be giving you several, when I say several, it probably is maybe double digit scenarios of like, I'm gonna run whatever scenarios you guys ask for. So if you're like, I wanna see these 10 or 15 scenarios, you're gonna get 10 or 15
I just feel like we need
scenarios.
a baseline to
Yep.
start our conversation.
Well, I can bring you like, here's what the budget would look like if,
We're in the same numbers.
oh, well, like, here's the base budget, meaning like, if we do nothing, this is where we're at. And then if we run exactly what we ran in November, this is what it looks like, same numbers. Yes, I can do that. It's very easy.
And here in those meetings for public comment,
There's a
correct?
public comment
They
at
can
every
come and ask
section.
questions and just,
We will have,
Yeah.
Julie's gonna set up and videotape all of them.
Okay.
Because there's 4 of them, so we didn't want to ask the communication team to do all those, because Julie knows how to do that, so she's here already. So they'll all be live streamed as well.
And Gary, to your comment too, again, and still totally respect, that when Jamie Nutter was here and he had said that, I think where I'm sitting is that since then, we have a new presidential election, we have a new potential vision on what the Department of Education is going to look like. So a lot of things have changed, significantly since he was here last too. So I think that's where my uneasiness comes more so than previously. So
Anything that would turn out to be positive would be
and that would be great,
Yeah.
right? If we, that's
Is there a point of clarification?
I was just gonna ask, I don't know if you listened to the live stream, but it gets really quiet sometimes.
Oh.
So if you could maybe think about that in these public meetings. Because, there are times when it's literally like this.
And then.
I totally know, but I don't know if that's something you can think about for people who can't make it.
Did we didn't hear them too for those, or was that gonna be in the gym? We here for the gym, okay, it wasn't.
You could always move to the gym if we had. such a
Yeah, we
crowd.
had them, yeah.
All right, if there's nothing else, we'll move on to public recognition.
Christina.
Christina?
Right, so hello, I am here on behalf of the CCEA negotiations team. Tonight, the board is going to be discussing or making some motions on a couple of items. Within the last month, CCEA has met with the Board of Education Personnel Committee. And with the failed referendum, CCEA did not propose a salary raise. And then the board they didn't actually propose any offer. And the board proposed a 0% increase. CCEA accepted and ratified this proposal. However, in place of a yearly raise, CCEA did request a meet and confer to discuss non-monetary alternative compensation. And we worked to offer ideas that would cost the district $0. We came to the board personnel committee with 5 items, and I believe it was discussed that 3 of them would make their way to the board. I see on the agenda there are 2 of them on there already for you to look at. And it was to consider changes to the May calendar for staff to be required to work a half a day to finalize grades. We also asked for consideration to look at summer PD for the summer of 2025. And then the other thing that we all agreed on bringing to the board was considering offering early retirement for the 2025 year. And so some of those are coming up very shortly. And we just wanted to give you a quick report and synopsis of the last month between CCEA and the Board of Education Personnel Committee. So that's all.
Just to let you know, the third one isn't the calendar, or next year's calendar, that's in there.
In there?
Just with-
Okay.
With those 2 dates out, so all.
Perfect. I tried my best to figure it out.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Christina.
Yes.
Thank you for working with us.
Thank you.
Can I just ask what the other 2 were?
I
That
would be,
proposed? or-
One was having the
One
first day
was-
back be a teacher workday.
one was a change to the calendar that was very immediate, and after consideration for the families and the communities, we all decided that it was not a good choice.
Just too quick.
It was too quick. And then, there was one about PTO also.
Right now, we have 5 PTO days, 5 sick days, and we talked about having 10 PTO days, and that was tabled. We're like, that's gonna take longer than right now, but it's something that we can consider.
And that one would cost $1 or more.
Yeah, we were gonna get some numbers to look at those. So, thank you.
New business.
New business. A is approved date and time for the January regular board meeting, which is scheduled for Wednesday, the 15th at 6:30. Mr. Olson is asking if that we could have the meeting at 5. Does that work?
I'm fine with it, everyone else is.
Alrighty. So then I will go ahead and try to make a motion to approve the January regular board meeting for January 15th at 5. Is there a second?
I'll second. Joel,
Yes.
Barth. Yes. White,
Yes.
Hinderman, yes. Poole,
Yes.
Bowden,
Yes.
Andrews.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item B is approve the 25, 26, and 26, 27 school calendars.
Yep, so we always approve 2 years in a row, and because about every 3 years, we have a week-long spring break, and we just like to allow families to do some longer planning. The rest of the calendar doesn't change too much, like a day here or there. The thing that did change in the 25, 26 is we have 2 floating PD days. And so that's actually for this summer. And we did take those out as part of our conversation with CCEA. So that's really the only difference for 25, 26 that we approved last year. Families would not feel that at all. And then 26, 27 is the year that we have the week-long spring break. As always, we have to start after September 1st. And we try to get done as early as we can in June. I think June 3rd is the latest that the kids go. And we try to get done that first week in June whenever possible. Any questions on the calendar?
I just question the parent-teacher conferences for high school because I know it's a waste of time.
We've had a lot of conversation about
And
that.
I know that there are some school districts that have days just for hour-wise to get hours in, where just high school and middle school go, or just high school go and elementary don't go. And I want to at least throw that out there for possible future consideration, because not great attendance at it's just hard to accept, I think, at many different levels. So I feel like we should maybe think about that in future calendars. I don't know.
We've talked about that administratively, like it's so critical and they have such great attendance at the elementary school. And the middle school drops off a little, but it's still pretty good by the time you get to high school. So we're trying to like look contractually,
Yeah.
same number of hours and days for teachers. But we've talked, we're like, well, what would be an alternative solution? So that's something that we'll continue to look at. And when we've got some ideas, we will bring them to you guys.
Any other questions?
I'm just trying to see, is next year a long spring break year?
No, I think it's
Or
26, 27.
No, I think you're.
25, 26 is the
25.
week
It's
long.
25, 26
Is the week long.
Anything else? Yep. There's nothing. Would someone move?
I'll move to approve the 25, 26, and 26, 27 school calendars as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Joel,
Yes.
Barth,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hinderman, yes. Poole.
Yeah.
Bowden,
Yes.
Andrews.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item C is approve the high school class proposals for the 25-26 school year.
Yeah, we don't have a link. Chris, were there any changes, or there were some teachers teaching different things, but no courses, so we really don't have to act on this, right? Because they're all the same, so we can skip it.
All right, so let's skip on to D then. Approve the sale of expired electronic device.
Yeah, Ms. Pam Trennell is retiring this month and is asked to purchase her laptop, which is nearly 5 years old, and we try to cycle out laptops every 6 or 7 years, depending on funding. We've done this with a lot of retiring staff before, and we work with TC Networks so they can figure out what the current cost is, and they pay that. So that's what we're bringing to you. Anytime we sell any school equipment, it's got to go to the board.
And that price is $285, is that right, what I saw? I'll move to approve the sale of expired electronic device as presented.
Is there a second to that?
I will second. Joel.
Yes.
Barth,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hinderman, yes. Poole,
Yes.
Bowden,
Yes.
Andrews.
Yes.
Motion carried.
E is approve the replacement of the high school PA system.
Sure, the Buildings and Grounds Department met and recommended we go ahead and replace the entire PA system at the high school ahead of the scheduled time. When I say scheduled time, this was built into the building project. It was already, we knew that was put in 14 years ago, and they usually last 12 to 15 years, so we've gotten good life out of it. It started to fail lately, and we use that for a lot of events, and we noticed it during Veterans Day, and we had to use some alternative speakers and didn't go all that well. It was hard to hear. So we knew that had to be replaced. It was in the building project. We were going to wait until they address that, make those changes in the gym. That's probably 18 months to 2 years out. So since that was kind of malfunctioning. We just said we would go ahead and do that earlier, but that was built in there. It actually came in under budget. We did get two different bids, one locally here at Lifeline and another one, Court Hill Enterprises. And I will be recommending, so the building and grounds, that we go with the Lifeline project, as they serve a lot of our technology needs here. They service a lot of them, and they're close and local. Building the grounds, Chuck, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
You know,
Chair?
I had a question if I got home. I mean, we never saw the price of the second bid if we had two bids.
Yeah, we got that after our meeting. It came in about 4,000 above the other one. It's linked in the agenda.
Okay, well, I don't get that. No, I'm not comparing with hers. But I that was just concerning because do we have a policy where we got to put something on that expensive two bid? Do we have a dollar amount or?
Yes, anything over $5,000.
All right, but I'm surprised we didn't have the second one the day that we talked about it. It's my concern. But if they were $4,000 more,
30,185, second bid.
all right, thank you. That's all I got.
So this is all involved in our original
Yeah.
plan anyway, and it'll just.
It was a line item in there as well.
Right, just so
Yeah.
it's just gonna be.
The money will come out of the building project fund.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, perfect.
I have a question, Aaron, and you probably can't answer it exactly, but option number one, it says there's one blown speaker, apparently is one of the main issues,
Mhm.
but the other four are good.
Yep.
Uh,
I think actually they said that there were two. They said there were three good ones and
Okay, the main one and the side one. And they said they can't tell us how long those other three that are working are still going to be good until they blow up.
But that's a $5,000 savings is what it says out of,
So that's if we just repaired what was broken.
it says replace one and add diodes, capacitors, power supplies. Like, I mean, I guess I don't even know what my question is.
Yeah, so
$5,000 seems like a lot of money
yeah.
for a $25,000 bid.
We talked about,
Why not save that 5,000, repair what's there on those things?
we talked about this quite a bit at the meeting about, it was either repair or replace all of it. Repair, we thought, okay, we could repair those items. And if it costs us about $5,000 to repair all those pieces, and then when we go to redo everything that was in the bid, then we'd only have 25,000 left. And so we didn't want to repair anything. We just wanted to replace everything.
Mr. Wright recommended the replacement.
Replacement.
Yeah, because they gave us no guarantee to repair how long it's gonna run. Because it's life expectancy, I guess it's.
And they were mixing and matching with different things, like we think
Yeah.
this can work, but they don't make that part anymore. And so we think this might work.
Okay, but it was discussed.
Yeah.
He said pretty much the life of the system is 10 to 15 years and
Yeah, we're at 14. And he calls us a super user, like we use that a lot. We use it for FIAD. We use it for a lot of events. That's our main, when we have large events, that's where it goes. So it's used quite a bit. We've gotten our money's worth out of it.
any other questions on that?
No, to approve the replacement of the CCHS PA system as presented.
Is there a second?
I will second. Joel,
Yes.
Barth,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hinderman, yes. Pohl,
Yes.
Bowden,
Yes.
Andrews,
Yes.
motion carried.
Item F is approve the collective bargaining agreement with the CCEA for the 24-25 school year.
I was gonna say pretty much everything that Christina said. So you heard everything there. And then we'll vote on a couple of those things that they changed as well.
Is there any questions, board, of that? As long as everyone understood. I mean, obviously, was not our wish that it's a zero increase. Nor I'm sure the EA's wish either, but we don't have the money to do it. So at this point, that is the agreement. And if there's no other questions, I will move to approve the collective bargaining agreement with the CEA for the 24-25 school year as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Joel,
Yes.
Barth,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hinderman, yes. Pohl, Yes.
Bowden,
Yes.
Andrews,
Yes.
motion carried.
Item G then is approving calendar changes for the May in-service days. Aaron, can you go through that again, please?
Yep, so this just, we had 3 in-service days set at the end of this school year. So I didn't believe students ended on a Friday and then staff came back Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The goal was with a past referendum, we were going to have some PD on that Tuesday and Wednesday available for teachers to choose. Since we failed the referendum, we would not have had that. So what the CCA recommended is let's just come in on Monday. We've got that day to finalize all grades, do our checkouts, and then be out. And that was something the personnel committee approved.
Any questions, board? Would someone move?
I'll move to approve the calendar changes for May in-service days as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Joel,
Yes.
Barth,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hinderman, yes, Pohl,
Yes.
Bowden,
Yes.
Andrews,
Yes.
motion carried.
And H is approve the early retirement option to be offered in 2025.
Yep, so this is something we said we would bring about and bring to the board for some discussion or see if that's something that you guys wanted to do. We offered early retirement last year to 7 people, and I believe 3 took it. And this is another item that we had talked about. Last time we offered it, there's a long process. We have to offer it and then wait so many days, and then they can accept it, and then we wait a certain amount of time. So the runway to get that going, really what we could say is that we're going to be offering that sometime in 2025. Eileen, our attorney, has retired. We're using her form. What I found in working with Richard, our new attorney, is that he does things a little differently. So he knows that we might be contacting him to look at our old document and adjust that. We'll really be looking at the dates would be a little different. Really, this would probably be offered, we're thinking next September, and then they would have all of September, October, and half of November to consider it, and then make that decision. And then we give them time to reconsider, and probably would be acted on in December, and then that would take effect in, starting July 1 of 2026 is that's the timeline we're thinking. And I believe it's 9 people qualify if we use that timeline. And again, that would be speculation. I know the CCA would like to make that just let's do that every year thing, where I'm looking at that as a MOU each time that we do that. We used to have that as a part of, this was pre-Act 10 in the handbook. That was just something that was available. That was just a post-retirement benefit. This way, if we offer it once and a while, the only difference is if you offer it once in a while, then people don't know when the next time it is. It might get them to retire a year or 2 early, where if it's part of that, the district handbook, then they know it's there, and it may not change the time they were planning on retiring either way. So those are some of the differences between doing an MOU and having it in the district handbook. But this was something that they asked us to consider. So early retirement, and if we're looking at this, a veteran teacher might say, okay, this person's going to retire at 85,000. We just use general numbers, 85,000, because each person might be a little different. If we can bring someone in at 55, that's a savings there of that 30. And now we do pay them out 12,000 a year for 3 years, and that eats into some of that. But those savings are still going on for 3 years as well. So that's how the district can have some financial relief for that early retirement. Excuse me.
And yet still afford it.
And still afford it, yeah. And that's why the CCA said this is a non-monetary thing, because it does benefit the district.
Are there other questions?
My only clarification would be like, you have the document that Eileen has used in the past, understanding we have a new lawyer. If it comes back dramatically different, would the board have to look at this again?
We can certainly do that. If you guys want to, just say, if you don't want to act on this, just say, Aaron, work with it. But we want to do this, but let's bring the new form back, because we've got time now to do that before we would offer it anyway. So you can either act on this or just advise me. I think the CCA would probably prefer that you guys act on it. But yes, I think that's a good idea.
I'm not opposed to acting on it, to be clear. I just was clarifying knowing that they may have a different
Yeah.
interpretation.
I
of
think
things
that's,
and
that's a good idea.
timelines.
So if he doesn't change anything besides the dates.
Yeah.
Not needed, but if
Yeah.
he does make other changes, I think the things that are in there that we spent a lot of time on last time where it was for people who've worked here, or teachers who have worked here for 20 or more years. It was 12,000 a year for 3 years. Those won't change.
Okay.
Those are,
Age 55.
and they have to be Wisconsin retirement eligible.
So what is the board's pleasure then? We have a motion on the agenda if somebody wants to make it. If it doesn't get made, it's tabled.
I would move to approve the early retirement option to be offered in 2025 as presented.
Is there a second?
I will second.
I'm gonna give it to Angie this time since I beat you last time. The next one. Joel.
Yes.
Barth.
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Hinderman, yes. Pohl.
Yes.
Bowden.
Yes.
Andrews.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Moving on to personnel. Item A is approve the hiring of Ms. Jenna Getty as the high school science and Spanish teacher.
Ms. Goody was an interim or intern for us this semester. She's licensed in science and Spanish, which is a combination that we very much value here. This just puts her in the same position as a full-time teacher instead of a student teacher or intern. We recommend that we approve this.
Are there any questions? Would someone move?
I'll move to approve the hiring of Jenna Goody as a CCHS Science and Spanish teacher as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Joel.
Yes.
Barth.
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Hinderman, yes. Pohl.
Yes.
Bowden.
Yes.
Andrews.
Yes.
Motion carried.
B is approve the hiring of Jalen Stedler as a new fitness center supervisor.
Yep, this position was created when one of our other supervisors graduated from Platteville and moved on. So just a reminder, these are part-time positions where there's several hours a week. And Tammy and Chris and I recommend that we approve this hire.
Can I ask just a couple questions
Yeah.
just on that? So how many, and just out of curiosity, because I'm getting not opposed to it, but when we have mass lifting, that's supervised by the coaches, I presume,
Yes.
correct?
Yep, this is
And-
just when it's open for the community.
How many, of our citizens, community members, frequent the fitness center on a regular basis? Do we have like a number?
So I think there's two questions. How many people have a membership?
Nope, how many, well, actually,
And how many people frequent? it?
how many people frequent it? Because that's what the supervisor would be supervising, correct? So,
That's something I don't know off the top of my head, but I know Tammy would probably have that and I can get that for you.
okay. And then how many, again, just because we're looking at budgets and how many hours on average is this fitness supervisor supervising?
I wouldn't know that off the top of my
So say
head.
pick-
either, but
I'm guessing 4 to 6.
Yeah.
A day?
Yeah.
And
Oh,
keep-
No, 4 to 6 a week.
A week?
Yeah.
And keep in mind that fitness center, that falls under Fund 80, which is a community fund, which all of our Fund 80 expenses are we tax for.
So she's not being, or
That
they're
doesn't come
not
out of Fund
hired out of, okay.
It's not coming out of Fund 10. So if we say our Fund 80 community expenses are, let's just say $50,000, I think we're like $68,000, we tax dollar for dollar our expenses.
Okay, all right. That helps a lot, thank you.
Any other questions? Would someone move?
I'll move to approve the hiring of Jalen Stadler as new fitness center supervisor as presented.
Second it.
Joel.
Yes.
Barth.
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Hinderman, yes. Pohl.
Yes.
Bowden.
Yes.
Andrews.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Under committee reports, budget and finance, is there anything to report? Nope. Digging grounds,
We met on the 11th on that situation, but I just wondered, we can have one in January sometime, just to see how things are going with lack of help. I know we're gonna be busy, just see what we're doing someday when everybody's available. It's not pressing at this point.
anything else?
No, that's it.
Personnel, our last meeting was on November 21st. There's a need or no need to schedule another?
Nope.
Policy committee, it's like
No updates from.
no updates till after at least New Year.
Yep.
Technology and transportation, we did meet at the Davis Bus Garage on December 11th. Angie and I went. Angie, anything you want to say about it?
No, I was actually really impressed by the technology and the shape of the barn and he was able to answer any questions that we had. So that was really good.
Thank you. Foundation,
Yeah, late January, February.
another meeting in a month or two.
Yep.
And as CISA Rep 3, we had an 8-minute meeting on Monday night, and there really wasn't anything to mention other than approving the bills. So I will take a motion to adjourn.
Erin, can you send me a matrix of who is in each of the committees and maybe send it to all of us? As well as like who's the main chairperson?
Chairperson, yeah.
For that, you have a matrix of that, that'd be great.
He does have it. I will make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
All in favor?
Aye. Merry Christmas, everybody.